Envoy Serena Kovalev stood before the imposing entrance of the Astral Nexus diplomatic hub. The metallic scent of processed atmosphere mingled with the trace fragrance of propulsion exhaust from her diplomatic vessel. Her sapphire blue ceremonial attire, adorned with the silver embroidery representing Earth's diplomatic corps, rippled slightly in the artificial currents from the docking bay's climate regulators. The fabric caught the harsh overhead illumination, transforming her simple garment into something almost regal and utterly conspicuous among the protected representatives filing through security. The checkpoint ahead bustled with activity as delegates from numerous species donned their various forms of protective gear, a new requirement following several violent incidents in recent weeks. Security personnel moved efficiently, examining and clearing each delegate with grim resolve. Serena smoothed a lock of dark hair from her face and straightened her posture. The responsibility of Earth's interests weighed upon her shoulders, but unlike those around her, she carried no physical burden of defensive equipment. Her decision had sparked controversy even among her own advisors, but she remained firm. Certain traditions were worth maintaining, especially when they doubled as strategic maneuvers. Security Director Telvis Merrick approached with purposeful strides, a container holding standard-issue diplomatic protection, clutched in his four-digited grip. The eccentrary's iridescent green scales reflected the light as he moved, covering his entire form except for his face, where intense amber eyes narrowed upon seeing her. He halted abruptly when he realized Serena had brought no protection of her own. "Envoy Kovalev," he said, his translator converting his natural clicking speech into resonant standard language. "There must be some misunderstanding." The security directive was distributed to all delegations well in advance. He raised the container. "I've brought appropriate protection for human physiology." Serena smiled diplomatically, but shook her head. "There's no misunderstanding." Director Merak: "Following Earth's ancient peace summit traditions, I come unarmored to demonstrate trust and honest intention." The station's security systems immediately identified her as non-compliant, surrounding her in amber scanning beams that traced her silhouette. Telvis's respiratory membranes fluttered in agitation, darkening visibly. "Envoy, with respect to your cultural practices," he said, lowering his voice, "the directive is non-negotiable. After the recent incidents, the Council authorized emergency security protocols without exception." "I understand the Council's concerns," Serena replied, maintaining her smile despite the uncomfortable scanning sensation. "But Earth has upheld this practice through far worse crises. When the Solaran Alliance threatened our settlements, Earth's representatives still approached negotiations unarmored. It's not merely tradition, Director Merak, it's policy." The security checkpoint had grown quiet, other delegations and personnel turning to observe the unfolding situation. Telvis's scales rippled in a pattern that Serena recognized as frustration. "Then I must escalate this to station administration," he said, tapping commands into his wrist device. "Please remain here." Before he could complete the transmission, the docking bay doors opened with a pressurized hiss. Elder Jelon Voth, the Christian representative and key figure in the upcoming trade negotiations, emerged from his vessel already encased in ceremonial protection that gleamed with shimmering blues and greens. The gear was as much art as defense, inscribed with the ancient commercial symbols of his people, but its beauty didn't diminish its deadly functionality. Voth's head frills visibly stiffened upon noticing the unarmored human. He approached with the distinctive gait of a Christian dignitary, each step precisely measured. "What causes this delay?" he demanded, his translator rendering his melodic speech into clipped standard language. His gaze fell on Serena, his sensory apparatus visibly scanning her unprotected form. "Arrogance or foolishness. Neither becomes a species seeking the Galactic Trade Commission's favor." Other delegations began to gather, creating a spectrum of advanced defensive technologies that contrasted sharply with Serena's vulnerable form. The Lumidian contingent in their liquid crystal encasements that flowed like quicksilver over their elongated bodies. The Taurian ambassador Merrick, whose species had evolved from apex predators. wore minimal protection that emphasized rather than concealed his natural bone structures. The photosyn representatives, with their light-processing skin, barely visible beneath heavy environmental suits designed to filter potential biological hazards. The human envoy insists on adhering to a cultural practice that conflicts with current security protocols, Telvis explained, his professional tone not quite masking his irritation. Vaugh's protective helmet partially retracted, revealing a face covered in fine azure scales and eyes like polished onyx. "We all have cultural practices," Envoy Kovalev. "Mine includes surviving diplomatic missions." A ripple of delayed laughter moved through some of the assembled delegates. "Station security has been compromised multiple times recently," Vos continued. "The protocols exist for a reason." "I'm fully aware of the situation, Elder," Serena replied, meeting his gaze directly, a calculated risk with a Christian whose culture viewed sustained eye contact as either a challenge or intimate familiarity. "And I mourn those lost in those attacks. But human history has taught us that sometimes vulnerability creates opportunities that protection prevents." Before Vos could respond, another figure pushed through the growing crowd. Station Administrator Elena Winters herself, human but following station protocols in light security gear, arrived with the practiced urgency of someone accustomed to diffusing diplomatic incidents. "Envoy Kovalev," she said, her voice warm, but her expression tense. "A word, please." She guided Serena several meters away from the gathered delegates, her gear making soft mechanical sounds with each movement. "Serena," she said quietly, dropping formal titles once they were out of immediate earshot. "What are you doing?" "We have credible intelligence suggesting the stellar cleansing movement has infiltrated the station. Their manifesto specifically mentions disrupting these negotiations. You're making yourself a target." Serena kept her expression neutral, aware they were still being observed. "Elena, you know as well as I do that we need to do what's necessary to achieve our goals. It's how Earth secured favorable treaties with the Solarians despite being outgunned. It's how we negotiated resource rights in the Viridian system when every analyst predicted we'd be shut out." "This isn't about resource rights," Elena hissed. "The last attack claimed many lives, including several humans. And I grieve for them," Serena said firmly. "But ask yourself, did their protection save them, or did it simply give them the illusion of safety?" She softened her tone. "The Helios corridor negotiations have stalled for years. Earth needs this trade route access, and if my standing here without protective gear helps secure it, then that's a calculated risk I'm authorized to take." Administrator Winters studied her for a long moment, the tactical display on her gear's collar flickering with incoming security updates. Finally, she nodded once, sharply. "On your head be it, Envoy," she said, "but I'm assigning you additional security personnel, as long as they maintain appropriate distance during the formal negotiations." Serena conceded, and Administrator Winters turned back to the assembled delegates and security personnel. "Director Merrick, Envoy Kovalev has diplomatic clearance from Earth Central. Log the protocol exception and proceed with the delegation escort." Telvis's respiratory membranes fluttered once more, but he nodded stiffly. "Logged. Envoy Kovalev remains personally responsible for any consequences of non-compliance with safety directives." "Always," Serena said with a slight bow of her head. The delegation proceeded from the docking area toward the central forum, moving through the astral nexus's sweeping corridors under heightened security. The station itself was a marvel of cooperative engineering, a massive orbital platform constructed at the junction of major trade routes, its architecture incorporating elements from numerous species design philosophies. The soaring arches would have seemed delicate if not for the visible reinforcement of molecular bonded alloys. Beauty and function intertwined. The central forum itself was the astral nexus's crown jewel, a vast chamber whose boundaries seemed to disappear into the stars themselves, one wall entirely transparent, offering a breathtaking view of a neighboring nebula. The chamber had been designed to humble, to remind delegates of the vastness of the universe they sought to divide and regulate with their treaties and agreements. The preliminary negotiations began with formal recognition of all delegates and traditional acknowledgement of the neutral status of the astral nexus. Procedural matters dominated the first portion. Confirmation of agenda items, recognition of speaking order, and establishment of recording protocols. Throughout it all, Serena remained acutely aware of her visibility, using the physical reality of her unarmored state to subtly reinforce her verbal contributions. When discussion finally turned to the contested shipping lane access through the Helios corridor, Serena rose to address the assembly. The simple act of standing unprotected before representatives of numerous spacefaring civilizations created an immediate focus that even the most sophisticated attention-gathering technology couldn't replicate. Honored delegates, she began, her voice clear and measured. For many standard cycles, we have debated the merits of expanding access to the Helios corridor. For years, we have exchanged the same concerns, the same assurances, and achieved the same result: stagnation. She moved from behind her assigned position, a subtle breach of formal protocol that caused several security drones to adjust their position in response. The risk was calculated, movement created engagement, and engagement was what Earth desperately needed. The United Earth government comes before you today not as a supplicant but as a partner. The corridor's current throughput operates at a fraction of its theoretical capacity. Our proposal would increase utilization significantly while reducing transit times for all authorized users by a substantial margin. She approached the central holographic display, calling up the transit simulation Earth's team had prepared. As the glowing routes materialized around her, she leveraged her unarmored state to become part of the presentation itself. The vulnerable human at the center of flowing trade routes, a visual metaphor for the position Earth sought in the greater galactic community. What prevents us from moving forward is not logistics or technology, she continued, gesturing to specific junction points where the current restrictions created bottlenecks. It is trust. The Christian Protectorate maintains priority access to preserve security. The Lumidian Consortium restricts biological transport to prevent contamination. The Photosyn Fellowship limits energy emissions to protect their sensor arrays. She turned slowly, making eye contact with the representatives of each named group. All legitimate concerns, all addressable through cooperation rather than restriction. She specifically addressed Elder Vos, whose attention she could feel despite his impassive expression. When we remove our armor, literally or figuratively, we create space for genuine understanding. Earth comes before you without physical protection because we believe that vulnerability freely chosen creates possibilities that no amount of defensive posture can achieve. The Christian representative remained visibly unmoved, but several neutral parties showed signs of engagement, the Photosyn representative's skin shifting to a more receptive hue, the Taurian delegation leaning forward slightly. Our proposal includes enhanced security protocols, biological containment standards that exceed current Lumidian requirements, and energy-dampening technology that would create a sensor-silent corridor within Photosyn detection grids. She gestured to specific sections of the holographic display, which highlighted each feature as she spoke. Most importantly, she concluded, it includes shared administration, genuine partnership rather than merely adjacent operation. We cannot build a safer galaxy by building higher walls between us. Earth stands before you without armor, ready to. The station alarms blared without warning, cutting off her words. Emergency lights bathed the chamber in pulsing crimson as atmospheric containment fields engaged with an audible hum. The holographic display flickered and was replaced by a station schematic, showing structural damage in adjacent sectors. Security breach in multiple sectors. The station AI announced, its normally melodic voice flat with emergency protocols. All personnel implement safety measures. This is not a drill. The forum erupted into controlled chaos. Security personnel moved to predetermined positions while delegates activated various protective measures. Most modern defense systems engaged automatically, sealing helmets and activating defensive fields. Administrator Winters accessed a secure channel from her position near the chamber's main entrance. "Security feed to main display," she commanded. The holographic display shifted again, showing surveillance footage from a maintenance corridor. A figure in what appeared to be standard station coveralls was visible for only a moment before static consumed the image. Seconds later, another camera activated, showing the aftermath. A gaping hole in a bulkhead, emergency fire suppression systems activating as secondary explosions rippled through connected systems. Advanced incendiary devices. Director Merrick's voice came through the emergency channel. Experimental composition burns hot enough to compromise structural integrity. Signatures match materials used in previous stellar cleansing attacks. Vaugh's armor had fully engaged, his voice now projected through external speakers. The forum's primary exit routes are compromised. Administrator Winters confirmed, her expression grim behind her helmet's transparent faceplate. Secondary routes are being secured. Atmosphere in connecting sections is unstable. Serena scanned the chamber quickly, assessing the situation. The central forum had been designed with security in mind. Multiple exit points, redundant life support, reinforced walls. But it had also been designed to be the heart of the station, connected to critical systems that now represented vulnerabilities. "Administrator," she called, moving toward Winters. "Your gear's sensor suite. Can it detect abnormal movement in the maintenance shafts adjacent to this chamber?" Before Winters could respond, another explosion rocked the station, this one close enough that the impact reverberated through the forum floor. A section of the ceiling collapsed inward, debris cascading down into the chamber. Delegates scattered, their defense systems reacting to the threat with varying degrees of sophistication. The safety systems of most delegates had engaged fully, transforming from flexible protection into rigid survival modes, paradoxically restricting movement as they became sealed survival pods designed to withstand even vacuum exposure. The Lumidian representatives had been completely enclosed in solidified crystal cocoons. The Photosyn delegation was immobilized by protective gel that hardened on contact with detected contaminants in the air. The collapse had separated Serena from the main group, a wall of debris now between her and the others. She could hear Administrator Winters coordinating evacuation through the still-functioning communication system, but the most direct route was now blocked. Serena's diplomatic training had included basic emergency and technical protocols for situations exactly like this. She quickly assessed her options, scanning the chamber for alternative exits. A maintenance access panel was visible behind a dislodged decorative panel. The kind of detail she might never have noticed if her attention had been filtered through protection sensors focused on larger threats. Moving quickly, she navigated toward it, picking her way through smaller debris. The panel slid open with surprising ease, revealing a narrow service tunnel. Without bulky protective gear, she was able to slip through the opening and into the cramped passage beyond. The maintenance shaft was dimly lit by emergency lighting, barely wide enough for her to crawl through. The air held the acrid scent of burning circuitry and superheated metal. She moved as quickly as caution allowed, guided by the station schematics she had studied during mission preparation. After navigating through the increasingly warm tunnel, she heard voices ahead, a harsh whisper in a language her translator couldn't immediately identify. She slowed her approach, edging forward until she could peer through a ventilation grate into a small junction chamber. A figure in maintenance coveralls was working at an exposed panel, connecting what appeared to be another explosive device to the station's environmental control systems. The operative wore a sleek helmet with a specialized breathing apparatus, not standard station equipment, but something designed for covered operations. The distinctive insignia of the stellar cleansing was visible on their shoulder, a nova rendered in crimson against black. Serena assessed the situation quickly. The operative was focused entirely on their task, confident that the previous explosions had secured their isolation. They clearly didn't expect anyone to have reached this section, especially not through the narrow maintenance tunnels that most protected personnel would find impossible to navigate. She considered her options. The terrorist was armed, a compact energy weapon secured at their hip, and likely combat-trained. A direct confrontation would be suicidal, but allowing them to complete their work could potentially kill everyone in the forum and beyond. The operative made an adjustment to the device, then stepped back to check a reading on a wrist-mounted scanner. In that moment, Serena noticed a crucial detail. The stealth gear they wore was sophisticated, but its joints showed the telltale hydraulics of assisted movement, military-grade, with one significant vulnerability: the cooling system. With careful movements, she shifted position to access a small control panel for the section's thermal regulation. With quick, deliberate commands, she overrode the safety protocols and diverted excess heat from adjacent systems into the junction chamber's thermal vents. The effect wasn't immediate, but within moments the temperature in the chamber began to rise noticeably. The operative paused in their work, helmet turning as they scanned for the source of the anomaly. Their movements became slightly stiffer as their gear's cooling system struggled to compensate. Serena waited until the heat had built to uncomfortable levels before making her next move, using the edge of her diplomatic credentials card. The only semi-rigid item she carried, she carefully loosened the grate fasteners. The noise was minimal, masked by the increasing hum of overtaxed systems in the junction. The terrorist had returned to their work, movements now visibly affected by the rising temperature. Sweat beaded on the exposed skin around their breathing apparatus, their attention divided between the device and the environmental alerts their suit was undoubtedly triggering. In one fluid motion, Serena pushed the grate open and dropped into the junction chamber, immediately moving to the main coolant valve near the operative. Before they could fully register her presence, she twisted the valve shut, then snapped it off at the stem. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic for the operative. Their gear's cooling system, already strained by the ambient heat, lost all external support. The joint servos immediately began emergency lockdown procedures to prevent overheating damage to the wearer. The terrorists tried to reach for their weapon, but their arm moved with agonizing slowness as the gear's joints seized. They managed to turn toward Serena, revealing a face contorted with surprise and fury behind their breathing apparatus. "You're supposed to be sealed in the forum," they snarled, voice distorted by both their breathing mask and their struggle against their increasingly rigid gear. "Sorry to disappoint," Serena replied, staying out of their limited range of motion. "Protection is rather restrictive in emergencies, I find." After navigating through the increasingly warm tunnel, she heard voices ahead, a harsh whisper in a language her translator couldn't immediately identify. She slowed her approach, edging forward until she could peer through a ventilation grate into a small junction chamber. A figure in maintenance coveralls was working at an exposed panel, connecting what appeared to be another explosive device to the station's environmental control systems. The operative wore a sleek helmet with a specialized breathing apparatus, not standard station equipment, but something designed for covered operations. The distinctive insignia of the stellar cleansing was visible on their shoulder, a nova rendered in crimson against black. Serena assessed the situation quickly. The operative was focused entirely on their task, confident that the previous explosions had secured their isolation. They clearly didn't expect anyone to have reached this section, especially not through the narrow maintenance tunnels that most protected personnel would find impossible to navigate. She considered her options. The terrorist was armed, a compact energy weapon secured at their hip, and likely combat-trained. A direct confrontation would be suicidal, but allowing them to complete their work could potentially kill everyone in the forum and beyond. The operative made an adjustment to the device, then stepped back to check a reading on a wrist-mounted scanner. In that moment, Serena noticed a crucial detail. The stealth gear they wore was sophisticated, but its joints showed the telltale hydraulics of assisted movement, military-grade, with one significant vulnerability: the cooling system. With careful movements, she shifted position to access a small control panel for the section's thermal regulation. With quick, deliberate commands, she overrode the safety protocols and diverted excess heat from adjacent systems into the junction chamber's thermal vents. The effect wasn't immediate, but within moments the temperature in the chamber began to rise noticeably. The operative paused in their work, helmet turning as they scanned for the source of the anomaly. Their movements became slightly stiffer as their gear's cooling system struggled to compensate. The terrorist had returned to their work, movements now visibly affected by the rising temperature. Sweat beaded on the exposed skin around their breathing apparatus, their attention divided between the device and the environmental alerts their suit was undoubtedly triggering. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic for the operative. Their gear's cooling system, already strained by the ambient heat, lost all external support. The joint servos immediately began emergency lockdown procedures to prevent overheating damage to the wearer. The terrorists tried to reach for their weapon, but their arm moved with agonizing slowness as the gear's joints seized. They managed to turn toward Serena, revealing a face contorted with surprise and fury behind their breathing apparatus. "You're supposed to be sealed in the forum," they snarled, voice distorted by both their breathing mask and their struggle against their increasingly rigid gear. "Sorry to disappoint," Serena replied, staying out of their limited range of motion. "Protection is rather restrictive in emergencies, I find." The operative made a final desperate lunge toward the explosive device, but their movement arrested mid-reach as their gear locked completely, transforming from protection to prison. They remained frozen in an awkward position, only their eyes still able to move freely, tracking Serena with undisguised hatred. With the immediate threat neutralized, Serena examined the device the operative had been installing. It was sophisticated, not just an explosive but something more complex. Its casing was emblazoned with the same Nova insignia, and a display showed a deployment countdown nearing completion. She didn't dare tamper with it directly, but the interface panel was still exposed. Using the station's emergency protocols she'd memorized, she accessed the communication system. "This is Envoy Kovalev. I've intercepted a stellar cleansing operative at Environmental Junction. They've installed some kind of device in the life support systems. I need technical assistance immediately." The response was immediate. "Envoy." Director Merrick's voice came through, surprise evident even through the translator. "How did you? Never mind. Stay where you are. Technical team is en route. Do not attempt to disarm any devices." "Understood," she replied, "but you should know it's not just an explosive. There's a deployment timer, and it's nearly complete." There was a brief pause before Administrator Winters' voice joined the channel. "Kovalev, we're seeing similar devices throughout the station. Engineering believes they contain weaponized nanites designed to infiltrate defense systems through ventilation filtration. Most delegates are fully sealed right now, which means their protection has already cycled contaminated air." Serena finished, the implications becoming clear. They're not trying to destroy the station. They are trying to hijack the delegates through their own protection. "Precisely," Winters confirmed. "The armor becomes the weapon. Security teams are nearly at your position. They'll need access to that device to understand the dispersal mechanism." Serena looked at the countdown timer, less than 2 minutes remaining. "I don't think we have time to wait." Making a decision, she examined the device more carefully. The casing was sealed, but the connector feeding into the station's ventilation was a standard coupling. With careful movements, she detached it from the system and redirected it into a maintenance waste chute designed for hazardous material disposal. "I've contained the device," she reported. "It's been disconnected from life support and redirected to a hazardous waste disposal chute. That might buy us time." "That helps," Winters responded. "But there are several other devices we've located, if even one deploys successfully." The sound of the security team's arrival interrupted her. 4 officers in specialized containment gear emerged from the main corridor, weapons trained briefly on the immobilized operative before shifting to secure the area. "Envoy," the lead officer acknowledged, surprise evident in their voice. "Are you injured?" "I'm fine," Serena assured them, "but we need to warn the delegates. If these devices deploy nanites designed to infiltrate protection." "Already working on it," the officer confirmed, gesturing to a technician who immediately began scanning the isolated device. Administrator Winters has ordered an emergency protection purge for all delegates, but many systems are locked in crisis mode. The forum's atmosphere should still be clean if the devices haven't activated yet, Serena suggested. If delegates can safely disengage their protection there, that's the plan. The officer agreed, but many species have safety overrides that prevent opening protection in potentially hostile environments. And after these attacks, then we need to prove the environment is safe, Serena concluded. Get me back to the forum. The journey back was considerably less covered, with the security team creating a protected corridor through the now secured maintenance sections. When they arrived at the forum's auxiliary entrance, Serena could see the chaos within. Most delegates remained partially or fully encased in their protective systems, security and medical personnel working frantically to override safety protocols. Administrator Winters spotted her immediately, breaking away from a cluster of technicians to approach. Her gear was partially disengaged, helmet retracted but torso and limb protection still active. "How did you?" she began, then shook her head. "Never mind. The situation is contained for now, but we got delegates whose protection safety systems won't disengage without proper authorization codes, and those systems may already be compromised." "What about Voss?" Serena asked, scanning the chamber for the Christian representative. "His gear's diplomatic override requires Christian High Command authorization. We've sent the request, but their protocols require verification that could take hours." Winter's expression was grim. "By then, if those nanites are what we think they are, get me to him," Serena said decisively. Winters led her through the forum to where Elder Voss stood in statuesque immobility, his ceremonial battle plate fully engaged. Only his eyes moved behind his helmet's faceplate, tracking their approach with evident frustration. "Elder," Serena addressed him, stepping close enough that his gear's external sensors would easily detect her. "The station has been attacked by the stellar cleansing. They've deployed devices containing nanites designed to infiltrate protection systems. Your safety protocols are preventing you from disengaging, but those same systems may be compromised." Voss's voice emerged from his gear's speaker, tense but controlled. "I am aware of the situation, Envoy. Unfortunately, Christian security protocols are absolute. After the assassination attempt on Prime Elder, our systems require central verification before emergency disengagement. I am trapped by my own protection." Serena studied his armor, noting the intricate patterns that weren't merely decorative but functional. Channels for energy distribution, connection points for systems integration. "Your gear," she said slowly, "it's ceremonial battle plate, correct? Based on historical Christian designs." "Indeed," he confirmed. "It honors the ancestral guard while incorporating modern protection." "Then it likely includes traditional override functions," Serena suggested. "Historical accounts mention the Breath of Trust protocol, a recognition system allowing allies to assist Christian warriors when standard systems failed." Voss's eyes widened slightly behind his faceplate. "You are familiar with Christian military history. Earth's diplomatic corps requires extensive cultural training," Serena explained, "especially regarding potential allies, historical precedents that might impact modern interactions." There was a pause as Voss seemed to consider her words. Finally, his external speaker emitted a sound like a sigh. "The protocol exists," he admitted, "though it has not been invoked in generations. It would require you to manually access the primary connection node at the base of my gear's spine and enter a specific pattern of pressure points. It is an intimate procedure, traditionally performed only by battle-bonded companions." "These are extraordinary circumstances, Elder," Serena replied simply. "I believe they warrant extraordinary measures." After another moment of consideration, Voss spoke again. "Very well. Administrator Winters, please clear non-essential personnel from this area. This procedure requires discretion." Once relative privacy had been established, Voss provided precise instructions. The override sequence was complex, a specific pattern of pressure applied to nearly invisible recessed points along his gear's spinal column, combined with a verbal passphrase that had to be spoken in precise Christian pronunciation. Serena followed his guidance exactly, her ungloved fingers able to detect the subtle differences in texture that marked each pressure point. As she completed the sequence and spoke the ancient Christian phrase, roughly translated to "I stand at your back," unarmored but steadfast, the gear emitted a series of musical tones. Slowly, the ceremonial battle plate began to disengage, plates separating along seams that had been invisible moments before. As the protection retracted, Vos stepped forward, his tall, avian form now covered only in the simple undergarment worn beneath protective systems. He turned to face Serena, his head frills rising to their full, impressive height, a sign of extreme emotion in Christian body language. "Envoy Kovalev," he said, his natural voice now unfiltered by translation systems, rich with harmonic overtones, "you have performed the breath of trust ceremony perfectly. By our oldest traditions, this creates a bond between us." He inclined his head in a formal gesture. "Your cultural knowledge is unexpected and most appreciated under these circumstances." "Knowledge is often our best protection," Serena replied with a diplomatic bow. As the delegates were gradually freed from their protection, through various technical and diplomatic interventions, the full scale of the stellar cleansings plan became clear. The attack had been meticulously planned, the initial explosions merely a distraction for the true threat. Weaponized nanites designed to infiltrate protection systems and override their control mechanisms, effectively turning the delegates into hostages within their own defense. Emergency triage stations were established throughout the forum, as technical teams worked to ensure no systems had been compromised before the plot was discovered. Administrator Winters coordinated the station-wide response while maintaining communication with the various delegation security teams. During a brief respite in the activity, Winters approached Serena, who was receiving a precautionary medical scan. "Initial analysis confirms our suspicions," Winters said, displaying a security report on her partially functioning gear's holographic projector. The nanites were specifically designed to infiltrate and override protection systems. They would have given the stellar cleansing effective control over anyone sealed in protective gear. She shook her head slightly. "Your lack of protection didn't just allow your mobility. It rendered you immune to the most insidious aspect of the attack." "A fortunate coincidence," Serena replied. "Was it?" Winters asked, studying her with newfound curiosity. "Earth Central has some of the most sophisticated intelligence operations in known space. The timing of your traditional approach seems remarkably convenient." Serena merely smiled. "Earth believes in being prepared for various contingencies. Sometimes older methods prove unexpectedly relevant." The negotiations resumed later in a hastily repurposed secondary chamber. The mood had shifted dramatically. Several delegates now appeared with portions of their protection deliberately deactivated or removed, a symbolic gesture acknowledging the human diplomatic stance. Security remained heightened, but the rigid protocols had been modified to allow greater flexibility based on individual risk assessment rather than blanket mandates. When Elder Vos entered, his appearance caused a ripple of surprise through the assembly. His ceremonial battle plate had been modified, the chest section now featuring a transparent panel revealing his scaled torso beneath, a significant cultural statement for a Christian whose military traditions emphasized complete protection. As the session began, Serena found the diplomatic landscape had shifted as dramatically as the physical one. Proposals that had previously met resistance were now being considered with genuine interest. The shared experience of vulnerability had created an unexpected bond among the various delegations. She used this momentum not to grandstand, but to drive forward key provisions for mutual defense and cultural exchange that had previously stalled. True security, she suggested during a pivotal moment in the discussions, might not always look the way we expect. The recent attack demonstrated that our traditional protections can become vectors for new threats. Perhaps our approaches to trade routes should similarly evolve beyond established assumptions. The Helios corridor access provisions were approved with unexpected speed, with additional amendments expanding the collaborative framework beyond what Earth had initially proposed. The Lumidian Consortium, impressed by the human ability to navigate crises without technological augmentation, offered preferential treatment for Earth vessels in their adjacent territories. The Photosyn, whose representatives had been particularly vulnerable to the armor-based attack due to their environmental sensitivities, proposed a joint research initiative into alternative protection systems. In the final ratification ceremony days later, a new protocol was established for the Interstellar Trade Commission. While security remained paramount, diplomatic missions now included designated trust representatives who might forego certain security measures to facilitate deeper cultural understanding. Envoy Kovalev became the first to be officially recognized under the new framework, with several other species cautiously beginning similar programs. As the delegations prepared to depart, Administrator Winters met with Serena in the station's observation deck, the stunning nebula visible through the vast viewing portal. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the swirling cosmic gases illuminate distant stars. Earth Central has asked me to develop training for the new Trust Representative Program, Winters finally said, her protection now completely absent, replaced by the standard station administrator's uniform. Apparently, my first-hand experience with unconventional diplomatic approaches makes me uniquely qualified. Serena smiled. You'll be excellent at it. You understand both perspectives. I still think you were reckless, Winters admitted, turning to face her fully, walking into a potentially hostile situation completely unprotected. But sometimes the galaxy needs a little human audacity. Serena gazed out at the nebula, its swirling colors reflecting in her eyes. It's not reckless to trust that what makes us vulnerable also makes us strong, she said, adjusting her diplomatic attire. Once again, the simple sapphire blue with subtle silver threading. Humanity learned that lesson centuries ago when we nearly destroyed ourselves through fear and distrust. Our greatest advances came not when we built better defenses, but when we were brave enough to extend an ungloved hand. She turned to face Winters. And now, the galaxy is learning it too. Winters nodded toward a passing group of delegates, several of whom wore modified protection with transparent sections, a trend that had spread rapidly following the Christian example. Not all lessons from ancient history are outdated. Sometimes the oldest wisdom proves the most relevant, Serena replied. A soft chime indicated Serena's shuttle was ready for departure. The two women shared a brief embrace before Serena stepped back, offering a formal bow. Until next time, Administrator. Safe journey, bare hand, Winters replied with a hint of a smile, using the informal nickname that had already begun circulating through diplomatic channels. As Serena made her way to the departure bay, she passed Elder Vos, who was overseeing the loading of Christian diplomatic materials. He acknowledged her with a formal gesture, his modified gear gleaming under the station lights, transparent sections revealing the vibrant blue of his chest scales. The Helios trade routes will see their first human vessels soon, he said, his voice carrying the distinctive musical undertones of unfiltered Christian speech. Your approach has proven effective, Envoy Kovalev. I look forward to a productive partnership. The corridor has room enough for all ambitions when we navigate it together, Elder, she replied. Indeed. His head frills rippled in what she now recognized as thoughtful consideration. The Christian High Command has approved the expansion of our diplomatic training to include what they are calling selected vulnerability protocols. I believe you humans would call it a paradigm shift. An apt description. Serena agreed, though paradigms rarely shift easily or without risk. Your willingness to bear that risk has been instructive, Vos added, his dark eyes studying her with newfound respect. With a final formal acknowledgement, he returned to his duties,